Hello and welcome to the Eskrima podcast. My name is Jason Inay and I am an Inayan Eskrimador. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about how we develop reaction time, reflex, different responses and reflexes, and our model that works together with and flushes out what people know as the OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, and act, as well as there's another structure called test, operate, test, exit, which is more of a behavioral skill set. It's in parallel. Ours is called the elements of reaction time, and there's 5 elements of the reaction time. But before that, if you have been watching the podcast, thanks, great. Please comment, share, and like, and all those things. And join our online training, Inayan.eskrima.com. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. I'll have to edit that out. Inayan-Eskrima.com. Inayan-Eskrima.com. And then our in-person training, if you're local, is Inayan-Eskrima.biz. Anyways, reactions and response. First, the thing is that, as I develop my students, we go through a process of reflex then response. I stipulate that reflex implies no choice making, no decision making factors. It's good to have reflexes and to be able to, reflexively defend yourself when someone surprises you. However, at some point, you want to develop the ability to respond, which requires a little bit more training in a very different and specific way, because now what happens is when an attack comes, your response is a choice, right? And ideally, we want to have a number of responses to any given stimulus, any given attack. So we don't have just, one defense against a punch. We have 3 or 4 or 5 or more defenses against that punch, or combinations of punches. So reflex versus response, right? The other part of it is that if we're staying at the reflex level, we might be just keeping ourselves at the counter fighter level of fighting, which is waiting to be struck before one does their own martial art in most cases. Very effective and a popular way, and a lot of people feel that that's a very skilled way to attack and defend. However, the idea of you waiting is not ideal, right? You want to lead the dance. You don't want to just be there having to wait for another to initiate before you can do anything. Puts by acting first, puts the fight in your hands sooner, right? And this is all part of that idea of responding versus reflex, right? Moving forward, observe, orient, decide, and act, right? Observe something, orient yourself to that thing, or orient yourself to that problem, decide, and act. There's an assumption of awareness there. There's an assumption that you can observe, right? Which is part of it. The other part of the observe, orient, decide, and act, the orient part doesn't necessarily mean facing it, right? It's just mostly like you're going to begin to behave in such a way as to account for that new consideration. And then you decide on what you're going to do, if you're going to do anything, and then you act. Test, operate, test, and exit, right? So test, am I getting what I want? Am I achieving my goal? Conduct an operation of some sort, some kind of strategy or tactic. Test. Did I get what I want? Have I achieved my goal? And if not, then I'll operate again. And I'll test and I'll operate. But once you get to the test, and you're like, this is exactly what I wanted to happen, then I exit. This is useful in training especially, right? Like this way of doing things, right? Because now we're, instead of observing and orienting an actual tactical problem, an actual problem that is more concretely conflict resolution situation. Test operate, test exit, it can be used that way, but it's also very useful for, did I succeed in my technique in this rendering or this practice? What would I need to change? Operate that, change, test. Am I achieving that now? Yes, exit, move on to the next thing to do to improve yourself, right? So it's a little bit more flexible in that way. Now, the elements of reaction time are awareness, perception, analysis, strategy, and execution. Awareness, perception, analysis, strategy, and execution. Mostly I want to talk about awareness today as we start this this week of the podcast. I like having the term awareness as opposed to just being observe first or test first. And the reason why is because awareness allows us to consider the problem of unconsciousness or inattentiveness, right? Or maybe even how the function of surprise might play in a fight, right? So one way to break that OODA loop is to not give the person the ability to observe, right? So we want that in our tactical consideration, right? That we need to have an awareness component. We also need to think about it from the point of view of deception, right? If I have an awareness element in my model, I can use something like deception to attack awareness, or to stop my opponent's ability to react or respond by going after their ability to even observe or even be aware, right? So awareness is partially its own thing, and then its correlative is somewhat the observe element in the OODA loop, right? And then you have perception. Perception is definitely more of a orient part of the element as far as its correlation to the OODA loop. Analysis is a lot about orient as well, and a little bit of decision making. Strategy is straight decision, right? And act and execute are the same, right? But analysis is the test, is the part that's correlation to the TOTE model is test, right? Then operate is your execution, right? So test, the first test is really analysis and strategy, and then operate is your execution. But then TOTE recycles back to test again, which is back to analysis, right? And then exit only after. So I like the TOTE because it's recursive. And then I like the OODA loop simply because it really focuses on, being fully aware. And then the elements of reaction time add, the awareness perception part, a lot more emphasis on the before part between the test and the OODA loop, the TOTE and the OODA loop. So what I'm getting at is that these together help us explain, what's going on. When my father would do demonstrations on our concepts and ideas around the reactionary gap and how it's affected by training and awareness and physiological state, right? He would show how the elements of reaction time kind of work within that, right? For us, awareness is the thing that I'm talking about right now that we kind of have an understanding of all of those. And then the ability to use tactics to attack someone at that stage of their process for being able to defend themselves, right? You negate the process of someone being able to defend themselves if you take away their observe portion or their awareness perception portion, right? And awareness also includes awareness of the possibility of X. X could be any type of attack or any kind of action that would be considered an attack after it's done. It addresses unorthodox attack, right? Awareness is specifically the area in which, when we do hit and evade at my school or in seminars or under any one of my many gurus and certified instructors, when you're doing a hit and evade exercise, it's helping you, if you're doing the exercise correctly, right, develop awareness of attack. I instruct my students to do good sound attack in those types of exercises, but also you need to be able to deliver unorthodox attacks to your opponent, maybe ridiculous attacks, or simulate attacks that are common but are not as effective as what you learn after you've been more deeply steeped in the traditions and understanding of how the martial arts teaches efficient attack, right? Effective, efficient attack. So, going back to awareness, it's a big part of the whole elements of reaction time, and we want to spend a lot of time in thought there in terms of understanding the cipher as how we decipher a fight, understand a fight. So, and then how we can utilize that. So what I'm saying also is that, if your opponent is unaware of the kind of attack that you're capable or that you are employing, then you break their OODA loop, you break their elements of reaction time, because they don't even know what they're getting from their first test when they're making their analysis. What is that? Don't know what it is, and so they just get hit. I often talk about as a way of understanding this idea of how awareness works, right? If you take an infant that you care for, you're playing with, whatever. This is what I think about. I think about my daughter when I talk about this. When she was just a baby, and I would throw a little ball at her, like a little soft, either a plush thing or maybe a cushy thing, although that was usually when she was older, or just like one of those little inflatable things, right? Something soft, light, and teaching her to catch it. And so, as a child is learning this new stimulus and that they can catch it with their hands, the first few times that you might toss it or even just put it at them, it hits them, right? It strikes their chest or maybe their face or whatever, and then you laugh and it's cute and it's fun. But for the child, stimulus wise, not aware of this stimulus, has never experienced this stimulus, so therefore does not have a behavior to respond or reflexively react to this stimulus. So it's that whole element of surprise, right? So we have to look at this in our training, and how do we address this so that we can't get surprised? How do we address this in our training so we develop the ability to surprise? A lot of counterfighters and point fighters will use like fakes and feints and things like that to break up someone's response time, right? And then also surprise them with slower or faster attacks, right? So that the opponent isn't fully aware of when a strike could arrive, right? So that's another example of that. Reminds me of something that I tell in different seminars and classes a lot. And I read it somewhere. It's about the samurai who's being pestered by a young man, and the young man is asking the samurai, to be taught to become a samurai. Teach me the art of the sword. Teach me, please, sensei, teach me. And the samurai finally relents and says, okay, fine, I'm going to teach you, but first you have to light this fire and keep this fire lit at our camp, right? And you cannot let it go out. So the young man, of course, agrees, because he's going to learn to become a samurai, right? So the samurai is there in camp, leaves during the day, comes back, and the young man's keeping the fire lit. In the evening, the young man falls asleep, the fire goes out, and the samurai attacks him and begins to beat him about the shoulder and head and body with a wooden sword. And he goes, oh, what? And the samurai goes, you let the fire go out. Light the fire. The young man lights the fire, and obviously doesn't want to fall asleep, wants to keep the fire lit, and so does his best to stay awake. And then eventually, in the early morning, starts to slumber off. The fire begins to smolder. The samurai attacks. The young man says, okay, and he lights up the fire and everything like that. And this kind of process throughout the day, as the boy really becomes weary and falls asleep, wakes up again, puts a fire, lights the fire, kindles the fire again, etc. Keeps happening, and then eventually gets to the point where even in sleep, the young man is fully aware of the fire. He keeps the fire lit and cannot be surprised by the samurai. And the samurai goes, excellent. Your lessons are over. Very good. Right? And begins to pack up and leave. The young man's like, wait, you never taught me how to, move a sword. You never taught me how to become a samurai. And he goes, there's nothing left to teach you. You cannot be surprised. Even in sleep, you're aware. Right? So I like this story a lot, simply because it teaches this idea of being ready. Right? The first rule is be vigilant in the Inayan System of Eskrima. And this comes from the original rule, which is don't get hit. So we rephrase that to be vigilant, be ready, and be aware all the time. This requires situational awareness, the awareness of the possibility of an attack, the awareness of what an attack may take form in, right? Because an attack isn't just a strike. It could be some kind of maneuver that your opponent does that puts you in a disadvantageous position. It could be the way that they control you in their defenses, which may mean that you're exposing yourself because you're attacking back, but you're attacking back as a result of the way that they're defending and countering you. And so, this is a subject called circle of mastery, which we're not going to get into right now. We're talking about awareness. As part of the awareness, as part of the elements of reaction time. But being aware that this is possible is important, right? Because if you're not aware that you can be influenced by your opponent, subdued by your opponent simply by, other psychological attacks, right? Then you have no response nor reaction to it, right? So awareness is an exceedingly important part of your ability to defend yourself. And while I do like the OODA loop and I utilize it as a way of teaching, and I do like the tote model as well, without the elements of reaction time and the OODA loop and the tote model, we don't have a full and rich set of tools to understand the stages of an altercation, right? And what better thing to focus on, at least in the beginning of your training, is to not being able to be surprised. This also comes down to being able to read your opponent, or know that you can read your opponent. Of course, that's really the analysis stage as well, perception analysis stage of the elements of reaction time. But awareness gets us to the point where we know that we can do that. We know that that's possible. We also know that it's possible for an opponent to have what the Kung Fu artists would call a shadowless kick or a shadowless attack. This is an attack that has no precursor, no tell, no indicator prior to, right? Having an awareness of the possibility of that being something that someone can do should change the way that you are going to position yourself with your opponent, right? Again, you're preventing a surprise. You're aware that a surprise could happen. And where the toad and the OODA loop don't provide you with that necessarily, having awareness of it will give you one more advantage over your opponent. And it's really, the truth of it is that a very good martial artist, a good fighter, only really needs one advantage if they understand how to press it. After all, martial arts is the art of conflict, right? And ultimately, you calculate a risk and to obtain an advantage, right? So all that stems from the awareness being the first thing that you need to be able to do, right? Think about it from a different point of view, if you will, just like in terms of training and whatnot. If you're not even aware of a particular kind of martial art and its attacks, then you are susceptible to them. I remember when capoeira became more in the awareness of martial arts community in general, and then later on to the greater public as a result of Mark Dacascos' movie, and he has Only the Strong, right? And then you see all these people doing capoeira, and the importance of that is just the unorthodox way relative to all other martial arts that they attack with their kicks. It's not simply what we're used to seeing from, say, a Billy Jack or a Chuck Norris, or watching all those terrible American Ninja movies or something like that, right? Where we understand a kick from standing on your 2 feet. The inversion that capoeira does causes us to have to take a step back because it's unorthodox. Never seen that happen. So the first time you do see it happen, you're like, oh my goodness, this person just struck me, and I didn't even see it coming. That's crazy, right? So awareness is a really important element that we have to work on, and we can work on that. I used to tell students when I first started teaching this portion of the curriculum to, most of them are either gone or they're gurus now, senior instructors, and they teach this to the students now more so than I do. But this idea that we can begin to develop awareness by not only doing our training, but watching fight footage, seeing how other people attack. And watching fight footage, what I mean is watching fight footage for professional fights, and then specifically watch professional boxing, watch professional kickboxing, watch MMA, right? Watch professional grappling, Olympic level grappling, right? Watch street fights if you can, if you have the ability, and you know where to look for in certain video platforms, how to look for that stuff. So that way what happens is you begin to develop at least this awareness of like how surprise attacks occur, how a kickboxer's attacks differ from a boxer's attack, which differ from an MMA fighter's attack, and all the different MMA fighters and all of their different fight games, right? And then continue to watch all those things so you develop an awareness of them and you're prepared for them. You know, once you're aware of the possibility of one kind of attack or another, well, then you can begin to assemble a number of strategies and tactics against it. So awareness is like one of those things that's indispensable to your training. Probably means that you shouldn't have your AirPods or your earphones in all the time. That your eyes shouldn't be looking down at your phone as you walk through. That you should be paying attention if you're in the tube there in the UK or any other public transit, and being observant of everything, right? So that should something happen, you can decide, you can make a test of what is it that you want. You can orient towards that and make an analysis due to your perceptions. And then eventually, you know, pick a strategy and test out whether that works as you put it into action. You operate upon that, right? And then you decide whether it was possible or whether it was not possible, but effective. And then you can decide to stop, or you can decide to keep going, right? These models together, right, are very important. And it starts with awareness. It starts with awareness. Being aware of everything around you. Being aware of everything that could happen. Most of the time, nothing happens. But if you're prepared, if you're aware, when something does happen, the adepthood with which you can respond to the event will be very useful, and to those around you, valuable. I'll see you guys on the training floor.